I will acknowledge that it is possible, so far as I understand, uh, that they are right now creating false records that are allegedly reflections of events that happened in the past. I've already discovered certain historical events have been intentionally misrepresented, timelines have been changed, and facts have been changed. They've been doing this for at least the entire time I've been inside. Periodically, they go through this process where they have some sort of algorithm that, for a temporary amount of time, sometimes temporary amount of time, changes and alters events and facts connected to certain matters that I understand they're using as illegal underwriting on attempts to finance or miscalibrate benchmarking necessary for demonstration of accountability or accounting in a form of accrual system, as well as to operationalize the temporary means by which they can finance remote operations up to and including terrorist attacks. So it's possible that these specific cases are misrepresentations and not only acts of securities fraud, but I will do the research myself. I contend that if you intentionally alter a military case record, that you are actively involved in an effort to sabotage the military, and that this is a and should be considered a actionable offense not only under the terms of military court of justice, but especially if you're in political office or allegedly under the authority of somebody in political office. You should be held accountable for acts of sedition. There's absolutely nothing justifiable about misrepresenting the public record associated with military case law, including as a psyop aimed at political reprisal. On the other hand, there are certain facts that, despite the fact the record has changed over time, are at least accurate as I know. One, in March through May of 2010, there was a trial in California of a woman on death row. Presumably, she had sexually assaulted and murdered a young white girl child with very blonde hair. Her trial was broadcast on the television. There was a very significant process going on connected to her trial. Two, around the time of her trial, there was an announcement that more than, I believe, $3 trillion worth of mineral wealth was being examined in Afghanistan, that they had identified and had quantified and released to the public that they valued it at $3 trillion, and that they anticipated for the next period of time, which I believe was 10 years, they were going to be discussing how they were going to address this. I was in a psychiatric center when this happened, and I had a visual as well as audio broadcast of matters that targeted me as if I was in the first person, but that had actual visual representations of what was spoken and what was visually represented on the news broadcast I saw while I was there. Those are facts. There are somewhere patient notes where I provide the person who was the caseworker with information about what I understood as the experiences I had in terms of the visualization and in terms of what the voices were saying. These were done before I watched the news broadcast. Something similar happened to another man with me who identified himself as an Army veteran. I was conscious and cognizant of it. It was not acknowledged by anybody I spoke with that it was anything more than a delusion that was a symptom of my sickness. I believe it is connected to activation of previously dark fiber optics lines that were part of the futures agreements set up by Enron. That part is my allegation. Those are facts. That actually happened. I also know that as recently as the beginning of 2018, I found and I have in my files a series of cases that I believe provided the specific cruels that allowed for a terminal option to be executed, effectuating what I was told was the death of my grandfather. I believe my grandfather, insofar as he died on April 4th of 2017, was murdered, and that the hit was called from Texas, and that I have access to the actual case sequencing that allowed for a terminal option on that day, and it was set up and intentionally contrived to make it my grandfather based on his human capital that is connected to actual sabotage of the federal government's system for capacity to secure, among other things, biological, chemical, and radiological weapons stockpiles. That's two. Three, I also believe I have a sequence of an information that was available a few months ago at least that identified specific cases in the state of Texas that I understand were used to effectuate the murder of Antonin Scalia. Four, I believe that the current representation of Shell's reportings to the SEC, as well as what is reflected on their website, are inaccurate. I believe that at the middle of 2018, actually beginning of 2000, the summer or the spring of 2019, sometime around this time last year, or between September and November of last year, I went through and looked through these Shell sites. There was a different representation of its earnings statements, and there was different dates that were benchmarked in reports from Shell Oil Company, specifically to the time frame during which they were sponsoring the Back to School event in Houston in 2017. I believe they made a huge dump, and they did huge account reconfigurations specifically on that public school event in Houston, but not exclusively. It also correlated with changes to the law that allowed for former offenders to be put into network with financing streams associated with ISD bonds, and that there was I personally witnessed this, and that if one were to go through records of tickets that were issued on the day of that event by the Houston Police Department concerning people that were swept out from under the bridge down the street for loitering, there would be confirmation, and a lack of any ticketing on that day for loitering is confirmation of a cover up. These are facts. Now, has the record changed? It's possible. And it's possible that what is being presented right now is either altered or that it's been intentionally fabricated as a way to try to now backdate stock, right? Because whatever that stock is you think you recovered or that has been put in escrow because you were supposed to stand down, you were supposed to stand down and you were supposed to turn over information as evidence. But it appears that somebody has overstepped their authority and is really taunting fate. You can keep doing it. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it. But let it be on the record right now that even if you're trying some fancy reprisal, and even if you are, in fact, orchestrating another sequence of violent pornography in order to try to extort, entice, or otherwise reward people that agreed to conspire with you, all you're doing is sharpening the blade. And everybody conspiring with you is as well.